So I think, seeing as we filled with a room of business leaders, I'd like to start with a few numbers. And the first number I'd like to start with is 6,900. Now that is the number of spectators at a Ryder Cup, and that's just on the first tee box. So that's a few more than your Saturday morning four-ball at Montchausier Golf. Another number, 270,000. That's the number of spectators that attended the last Ryder Cup over the entire week. And then they were those watching from afar. The 2018 Ryder Cup in France had 22 billion global impressions on social media. So that's a lot of eyeballs and a lot of pressure watching every single shot that you play. And then because of the business leaders here, here's a number you might certainly appreciate. That same Ryder Cup was worth 236 million euro to the French economy. It's big business and it's big pressure. And at the heart of it all is two captains, their vice captains, and 12 players per team that are going to do their best for their respective teams. So tonight, as we've said, we are privileged to have two men who've experienced that cutthroat competition and that pressure at the highest level and triumphed. And we're going to try and learn a few lessons from them that we can apply in business. Thomas Bjorn, a Ryder Cup veteran, as we know, he's never been part of a losing Ryder Cup team. And he's captained the victorious 2018 team in France. And Nicolas Coursin, a Ryder Cup champion who impressed on his debut as part of the winning European team in 2012. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you.
Thomas, I think if I could please start with you. To play in a Ryder Cup is special. To then get asked to captain a Ryder Cup team is special. And to win on top of that is the absolute ultimate. So I'll start with a really easy question. How do you win a Ryder Cup? And how do you captain a winning Ryder Cup team?
Well, you win the Ryder Cup because you got 12 players that are very, very good. And they're very good at doing something together, which is obviously a very big task. You got individual players that are competitors week in, week out, and now you got to bring them together, and they got to do something for each other, which is unusual in their worlds. You know, we run, as professional golfers, we run little one-man businesses with a caddy and a coach and a few people around us, and they're kind of our employees, and so that's the world that we live in, and we try and beat the hell out of each other week in, week out, because that's the nature of professional sports. So when you go to a Ryder Cup as a player, it's obviously a great honor, and I think one of the things that the players in general feel is that, you know, when you're an individual sportsman, there's a lot of great things about being an individual sportsman, but there's also things you're missing, and one of the things you're missing is that kind of locker room feeling. You know, you're doing something together. Sports people, you know, thrive on that environment of doing something as a group, and you miss that as an individual sportsman. So when you get the opportunity in the Ryder Cup, it's a pretty cool week. But I think as a captain, you know, when you get asked, which is something that you kind of have an idea that your name is being mentioned in the background, and you have a hope and an idea that it might be coming your way. But when you get asked, it's a great honor, and the first few days it's happiness, and then all of a sudden that kind of world of like, hang on a second, now you got to spend the next 20 months being the Ryder Cup captain, and you now got to all your ideas of what the Ryder Cup is and how it should be played, how the team should be. You know, now you have to get all of those things down on paper, and then now it's got to live. And there's a lot of moments in that, for me, in that 20 months period where I really doubted myself, and that kind of, am I right? Is what I think, is that gonna work? So there's a lot of moments, and then you're on your own, and in that kind of role. And one of the funny things about being Ryder Cup captain when you do a project over 20 months is that it's you that's running the project, but you feel very lonely, because a lot of people that work with you have just come out of a Ryder Cup. They just come out of another project, and they kind of need to evaluate that Ryder Cup. So that for the first few months, it's really, there's only you and your thoughts, and you have nobody to talk to. So you end up sitting there talking to yourself most of the time, which is interesting at times. But that, you know, so it you kind of work in a world of yourself and not really getting anywhere. But then all of a sudden, you know, when people start getting in place and you get your team in place, then it starts accelerating. And then all your thoughts, you know, there's a lot of, how do you deal with 12 individuals? How do you deal with guys that, you know, are competitors? How do you take, what's your idea? And I went into it, I've played under 3 captains, and I had been a vice captain 4 times. So I've seen 7 different captains in action. So I've seen a lot of different leaderships, from chaotic to very, you know, Sevi, it was very chaotic, it was very emotional. You had a Bernard Langer that was very much on point with everything. Everything was written down and everybody had to work in the German machine, and this is the way we're going to do it. And they were both successful. You know, so you have very different styles of leadership that have both been successful. So for me, it was, you know, picking things from everyone, but also being true to myself and what I am as a person, and then try and look at individuals and say, well, how do I deal with these individuals to get the best out of them? And I quickly found out that, you know, players, you start with a group of, I'd written a list of all the players that I thought could make the team. And I think there was 48 players on that list when I started, 20 months out. And then you start, there's a few that weren't playing particularly well, and those few, you know, and then the list gets smaller, and you start writing down things about them all, and in the end, you know, it gets narrowed down, and you have to make your decisions on getting 12 together and which 12 it's going to be. But I spend an awful lot of time with the top players early on. So your Rory McIlroys, your, you know, Justin Roses, guys that I thought, well, if they're not there, I don't really want to be there either. You know, that was kind of like that was my feeling. So I spent a lot of time with them early on, talking ideas, and then I, you know, started to focus on the lower ranked players, if you can put it like that, or the guys that might make the team, or might, you know, there weren't shoe-ins for the team. And I think that was an important thing for me to do that, because they are so individual and they are so different. But I did over 20 months, we did a lot of different things for me to understand them, for me to involve myself with them in different ways. But the one thing that was the main thing I learned over 20 months was, and I think that goes very much into how you lead people. Use people for what they're good at. You hire, like I say this to people, and I have not run businesses on high level, but this is the one thing I took out of that. Make people do what they're good at, instead of trying to change people into what you think they should be. Because when I looked at the players I had, and they all have very high thoughts of themselves. You know, they're individual sportsmen. They think they're the most clever guy when they walk in the room, which they very rarely are. But they do think, and that's probably what makes them so strong. But I didn't want them to, you know, if a Rory McIlroy is a player that's obviously has an unbelievable talent, he's a very likable guy, everybody wants to play with him. But Rory has an idea that he's the greatest leader in that room, and what he says should be the way, but he thinks very different than everybody else, and that makes him not very good at standing up in front of 11 others and make them do the right things, because he thinks differently than they do. So he was never, so I always with Rory was like, no, you go and play golf. The one thing I want to see from you, lead with the golf clubs, because that's what everybody looks at. They know you're the best player, so you go out and lead with the golf clubs. Don't do the talking. Let other people do the talking. People that are good at talking, let them do the talking. So I tried to, with all 12 of them, put them in a position where they were comfortable with the position they were in, and I took their strengths and let them live their strengths, instead of trying to, no, I'm going to try and make this guy be like this to work with this guy, because then he couldn't function. And I succeeded to some extent. I mean, things change and mix and through the week, but I think we created an environment where everyone was so comfortable early in the week, and once they're comfortable with each other, they work well with each other, and then there's also much more acceptance for each other. And I think that was very much the environment I felt we had in Paris, an environment of 12 that wanted to do it together, and then it was not about me, it was about the 12 together as a unit.
Wow, well that's the leadership seminar right there. Thanks everybody. Have a good evening.
Yeah, keep going. You don't need me. Just gotta go.
Thank you very much for that insight, Thomas. Nicola, we definitely still need you. You were one of those new faces in a Ryder Cup team, and you did superbly on debut. That Friday, you and Lee Westwood took down Tiger Woods and Steve Stricker, and you made 8 birdies and an eagle, I think, in that match, and just rose to the challenge of the pressure and the eyes on you. What was it about the leaders around you at that stage that allowed that freedom to be yourself and to play that kind of golf?
Well, at first, when I got to the Ryder Cup, I mean, it was always a big dream and a big goal of mine to play in a team. I was very fortunate because I come from a family where team sports has always been a thing. So, Thomas touched on the fact that golf is an individual sport. Even though I'm an only child, I grew up playing team sports, and I think if you ask most of the guys that were there that week, they would have seen straight away that I understood, even though I was the only rookie in that team, I understood the what happens in the locker room, how to speak to this guy, how to speak to this guy. I had made a mission for myself that what I wanted to do was, well, ultimately have my name in the history books, but I wanted to make an impression and make a contribution. And I think that when you work as a team, if you have elements of people that are there to give everything to make a contribution for the whole mission, you can get to the result that everybody wants. But I was also extremely lucky to play well. So straight away, for being thrown out into a very hostile environment, because the Ryder Cup is a hostile environment, especially when you go and play in the US. I was able to affirm my spot in the team, and being able to look at Rory McIlroy or Justin Rose, all these major winners that have maybe not had the same CV, but walk into a room and walk head high and know that I had really made an impression. And they looked at me. I felt really flattered. When you have big players like that look at you as in like, wow, that was pretty fucking cool. Your personality changes, and you feel acceptance, and you feel that you have what it takes. And as a sportsman, I don't think there is a much bigger achievement to be accepted by your colleagues and your peers. And then again, I mean, to do it at the Ryder Cup is something just incredible.
And even Tiger Woods came up to you afterwards and said, well played, after you'd beaten them.
Well, yeah, I mean, that again, also in my wildest dream, if you talk to Thomas, he would have been maybe playing against Tom Watson or Jack Nicklaus, or maybe not that old, but maybe Tom Watson. I'm pretty sure you would have been flattered. But yeah, I mean, it's like playing basketball against Michael Jordan. Imagine you play an NBA final against the Bulls in the 90s, and Jordan comes up to you and says, you feel pretty good about yourself. But yeah, what's also funny is that I basically asked to play with Lee Westwood because I didn't know how I was going to react, and that's something that, the roles of vice captain is really important, because I remember we had chat with Thomas, because he was like, we never know how rookies are gonna, perform or get into the week. Some people just get absolutely shit scared of it because it's a big thing and there's a lot of pressure, and you represent Europe. There's 11 other guys. You get booed the whole week as soon as you get there. So you never really know how you're gonna react. And the preparation or the help that I've had from all the guys involved has allow me to get into the week and find myself and find my role, and ultimately made me able to perform.
Thank you. Thomas, you touched on it a bit earlier now, in terms of, and Nicola also spoke about it now, in terms of playing for something bigger. That's what the Ryder Cup is all about. Every single week you play as individuals, you're playing for yourself and your families, but now you're playing for something far bigger. How did you go about communicating that message to the players, and what tactics did you use to get that bigger purpose that you're playing for this week?
I think I did a couple of things. I mean, we do so many things during the week and as a team, and you kind of, it's a very, very busy week. It's a very draining week. It comes at a time of the year where they are tired. They 6 of them, my team came back from the Tour Championship in America, flown across the Atlantic. It's at the end of the season, and obviously if you're in a Ryder Cup team, you've had a great season. So you played a lot of stressful golf, so they are drained. So I wanted to make, and the Ryder Cup week is a long week. There's a lot of things going on, there's a lot of functions, there's a lot of different things that the players have to do. And on top of that, they play 36 holes Friday and Saturday, so they get also, it's a physical, it's a tough week for them. So I wanted to make it a week of, I wanted to surprise them a little bit, because they all see me as quite intense. I know I spend a lot of time analyzing them, but also spend a lot of time analyzing myself, which I think was probably a good thing I did. And how people see me, how I was portrayed, not just to the public, but to the players. And I quickly realized that they see me as quite intense, and I think one of the fears they had was it was going to be one of those weeks where this is what we're going to do, and I was going to stand up in front of them and tell them how it was going to be, and you lose their interest very quickly. So I did a few things early, like in the first evening they got there and they just kind of landed, and we had a beautiful big team room that we have made in with all our history and all these things that you kind of do to make it nice for them. And they and I played a video where I literally took the piss out of all of them and all their weaknesses. I had a guy, you might have seen that guy, he does Connor sketches, yes, he does impressions, and we literally just really took the mick out of all 12 of them, but in the end I really took the mick out of myself through him, and it just made a really nice environment. It put everything down on the ground. This is where we start, and then we build it up slowly. And on Thursday evening I played a video for them that I had a friend of mine make, and it was all about who you are. And this video goes back to, it was 3 old Ryder Cup captains, Brian Hoggett, Ulla Zabel and Sam Torrance, and they talk about what it's like to get old. And you've lived all these things in your life, and it gets, Brian Hoggett talks about in the beginning, as you get older, things get taken away from you, and that's part of life. And to tell them the story of, this is your moment. You are in this moment, but there's a past, and there's also a future. You are just a little piece in this moment in time in the Ryder Cup, but take care of that moment, because you could do so much with that moment. So I wanted to tell a story about what they are and what they can be, and through that video. And it was quite an interest, because we have done many old inspirational videos in the past, and it's very much about our success. It's all these films about Seve and Ollie and in the Ryder Cup, and you sit there, and that's great. When you go in as a rookie and you watch 2 or 3 of those, you are really drawn in up in them, so you get drawn in and you're so into it. But you're Sergio Garcia's or Lee Westwood's, that's 10th or 11th time they play. When these videos come on, they've seen them so many times, the phone comes out of the pocket and they start checking emails. And that's literally what you don't want. That's the last thing you want to try and achieve with it. You want them all involved. But this video, and I could see when I stood up and said, well, we've got to play this video, and I want you to just take, your own things from the video. And I could just see, the older guys or the more experienced guys were a bit like, oh, okay, well, here we go. It's not really. But they, once this video was done, Justin Rose had tears down his face, and they just got so drawn in, and it was very quiet, and they all went to bed with a purpose for the morning. So I achieved thought about who they are in that moment. And I think when you stand in front of people and you've got to try and make them do something, and you want them to go an extra mile, You've got to make them think about what they can do in this moment in time to do something that's not just for me in that moment, but for the bigger picture of what I'm doing with my life right now. And I think we achieved that with them, and it's certainly something that we feel afterwards that, you know, talking to them, that there was moments in that week where they realized that they were part of a bigger picture. And I think that's important. You know, we played it on what it's like to get old. You can also play it the other way of what it's like, you know, when you have dreams as a kid. What is it that you're trying to do? People lose themselves in life sometimes in the stress of every day, and they forget what they're part of. And the Ryder Cup has a great way of bringing these top professionals back to a little bit of reality sense if they're led in the right direction. And that's, I feel like we achieved that. The players will say, as it told me afterwards, that they felt we achieved that. And that creates an environment for them to be their best. I can't stand up in front of Rory McIlroy and tell him how to play golf, because he will look me straight in the eyes and go, yeah, 4 major championships, 21 victories in America, world #1. What's your CV look like? You know, he won't react to that from me. That's not my role. My role is not to tell him how to play golf. My role is to find a way to make Rory realize who he is and how to react to things and be something that's bigger. And one of the things I said to them is, Seve was my great idol growing up. Fantastic golfer, charismatic. He was European golf through and through. When you look at him, 5 major championships, 88 victories worldwide, the best golfer through probably in the world through a decade. But when you see a photo of him, 9 out of 10 photos are from the Ryder Cup. It's always, his name is always associated with the Ryder Cup and not his individual career. Why is that? And I said, I looked at them, I said, you can use this Ryder Cup. What you win of major championships and what you win of individually, that's your legacy for yourself. The Ryder Cup is your legacy for how people portray you. He is the biggest hero of European golf through the Ryder Cup, not through his individual achievements. That's what I want from you. I want you to use this week to be something for everyone on this continent. And you could see that the top players are like, well, you know, I can use a bit of that because I get enough accolades over here for my individual stuff. I can use a little bit more love from the people around, because sports people, that's what they want. They crave love through their achievements. And I think that's, you know, that goes into any walk of life. If you're successful in school, if you go in and you work hard on a project in school and you put it in and your teacher comes back and goes, there's your A and how great it is and all that. You as a kid, you grow, you feel successful and you feel like, yeah, this is amazing, you know, and that makes you want to do it again. You want to do it again, and then you work hard and you work hard and you work hard, and then you become successful in school, and then hopefully you go on to be successful in other things. And it's the same with these guys. They crave love, and they crave, you know, they love being told how good they are and how they've done things right.
Wonderful.
That's not true. We don't like to be center of attention at all.
I've always been intrigued. I think all of us have been intrigued about that team room, what goes on in there, and that dynamic amongst the players. And Nicola, I wanted to ask you in particular. You know, it sometimes feels like when you're in a boardroom in business or in life in general, the loudest voice wins. The one who stands up and speaks the loudest must get the point across in the business or in the negotiations. But I'm more interested in the introvert in that team room, because I've heard some of the players talk about, you know, this player didn't say much, but when he did stand up and say something, it made an impact on me. Can you perhaps speak a little bit about the quieter players in that dynamic who have that kind of impact?
I mean, I don't consider myself somebody loud into a team environment. I think you just have to choose your moment. I mean, to go back to my experience, you know, being a rookie, I needed to make sure that if I said something, it was going to be valuable. 2, would give me some street cred. So I needed to make sure of what I was saying. So I kept actually pretty quiet. The only thing that I did was basically just imposing who I wanted to play the first day, because I felt that was what was going to get the best out of me, and I didn't. And it's a difficult position to be in, because you want to be the good boy. I was raised, with a set of values that you had to follow the stream and you have to be a good boy and everything. But in this case, when you play for something much bigger that we touched on, I needed to make sure that if I said something, I was sure I was putting forward. In our team room, you have Poulter. I mean, we've all seen Poulter. What Poulter is like when it comes to Ryder Cup, it just becomes a different beast. And then you have, in this case now, you have Luke, who is our captain this time, who's just completely the opposite. I mean, Luke paints on his spare time. So you have a football fan from the stands and you have a painter on one side. So these people are just not going to function the same way. But that doesn't mean that Luke is not somebody that when he says something, which is what you touched on, it's maybe time to listen to him, because he doesn't speak much. So you know that when he opens it up, it might be worth to pay attention. I mean, I think the locker room is what, I mean, of course, when you're able to play well in the Ryder Cup and you're winning is just something, it's just an avalanche of amazing vibes. I mean, even now, every time and I'm basically just remembered for that Ryder Cup. I might have won a few times on tour, but my name is associated to that Ryder Cup in Medina. And I forgot where I was heading with this. No, but this is just an example of when I think Ryder Cup, when I go back there, it just takes me somewhere else, because it's such an overwhelming experience, from the size, from what how much it resonated within me. And then I lost it again because I'm dreaming about it again. But we talked about pressure and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I'm actually really glad that I don't have to hit shots at the Ryder Cup again, because it's just, I mean, I don't know if any of you have been to one. I mean, it's, I imagine being at the Hyde Park in front of 300,000 people. I mean, it's quite stressful. So.
And yet you made it look so easy, and you look calm, and you look so cool, and that, it's a question for both of you. If I can just stay with you now for Nicola, that gut instinct, when it's all on the line like that, and sometimes maybe even the numbers don't make sense, the wind doesn't make sense, or something doesn't make sense. Do you rely on that gut instinct, that feeling in your stomach that says, go for it?
Well, that's what sport is. I mean, we all got into the sport because we're competitive. We maybe have that little extra thing that allowed us to get to the top of the tree. But the core of high pressure, high performance sport is basically just putting your foot in the door and saying, that's mine. And I think that's one thing in Ryder Cup. I mean, you would come across a few guys that took maybe one edition or two to actually show and understand and being able to produce at on such a big stage. I was lucky to be able to do this right away because I knew I had that in me. It was never a problem of me of knowing that I had this, because I knew deep down. I grew up team sports. I don't consider myself a leader. I'm not a number one, but I like to choose my allies in the team, and I think that's also really important. The US have used this system of different pods, of having your soldiers sort of thing, and that's also quite helpful. And I've lost it again.
But Thomas, you would have sat with that situation countless times, I'm sure. You've got team sheets. You've got to decide on pairings. You've got to put players out there, and you know what they're up against, and there may be a question mark for you. Is this player ready? Should I go with this player and this player? Is he ready for this? When facts and logic don't make sense anymore, do you just go with that gut feel and say, let's take a chance?
Well, I went into it, and you do all your preparation, and I used statistics in my preparations a lot. The golf course, how players match each other statistically. I did a profile on each one of them. That was difficult. I sent 500 questions to each player that they had to answer, and I got a 25-page profile on them, each one. tell you, asking Rory McIlroy to fill that out is not easy. I had to ask him probably about 5 times. Sergio was difficult as well, because they don't like giving anything away. So you're asking them all these questions, and I had a guy do it for me. But I used it in a way of, I promised them first of all that I'm going to ask you these questions, you're going to fill it out, I'm going to get the profile on each one of you, and I promise you the day the Ryder Cup is over, it's all burned. It goes nowhere but to me. But what we did with it, and I got these, and it was heavy reading, and I know a lot about a few of them today, probably not too glad I know about them. But what we did with it was that obviously I couldn't use these profiles in the heat of the moment. So what I did was I'd made these little booklets that I had with all 12. So I had a booklet in my back pocket with my 12 players in and my 5 vice captains, and I had how to speak to them, what they like, what they don't like, how to speak to them, 5 points of how you talk to this person. So if I was in a conversation with Alex Noren about, I could go, well, this is how I need to talk to him. This is how he reacts. Well, he certainly doesn't want me to be like this. I need him either to talk, I need him to kind of be involved in the conversation. And I'll finish that conversation off and I'll go, okay, he's playing with Sergio, which he did. Now I need to talk to him. Straight over, Sergio, this is the way I talk to him, because everything happens so quickly. So I had it fresh in my mind, how to speak to people. Because I think people look from their leaders in a way of, not everybody likes just to be told what to do. Some like to engage in the conversation. Some do like to be told what to do. Henrik Stenson is a person where I go, Henrik, I need this from you. Dum 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 dum, and he goes, okay, I deliver that. And with him, I said to him, I'm only going to play you 2 foursomes. Top player, very strong European player. He'd been injured. I'm going to play you in 2 foursomes with Justin, and I want you to be ready for your singles. And this is how I want your week to pan out. And he went, okay, well, if that's what you think, that's what we go for. He prepared himself. He already delivered 3 points out of 3. And I always look back at it and go, you kind of get your players and you kind of in your own head rank them a little bit. And he was probably my hero. Everybody talks about Francesco and Tommy that in that Ryder Cup that was so successful. Francesco winning 5 out of 5. But Henrik was quietly my hero because he did what I asked of him. So everything, all the conversations I had with him, he lived up to everything that he promised. So, but I used these booklets for me to have an interaction with them and could quickly move from person to person. And I had it on my vice captains as well. But all my vice captains had it on the players. So they had just the booklet. They hadn't seen the reports, they just had the booklet, so they could have these conversations with them. And we used it a lot.
Can you push for this in September? I mean,
well,
I'm all in for this.
But it's a really, really good. It was a really good tool. It was a really good to understand your players and what makes them interact in a good conversation and how they so you get the best out of them in that way. So that was something that I felt that was very useful. I think when you look at it, and Nicholas talked about it, different captains and introverts and extroverts and people that are, and yeah, we have a captain that's this time around that doesn't say a lot, but I think that's a strength. I think it's if you have the loud one that's in the room that always talks, you kind of sometimes fall deaf on it and then you lose out on the great things that actually come out of his mouth, because it's just a long line of all sorts, and you don't pick up on the good things. Where when the quiet ones speak, you kind of go, well, I better listen to this. So it's but they are then difficult to get to speak. So you kind of gotta get them positioned where they feel comfortable, so they open up to it. But it goes back to what I said earlier. People have the perception people have of themselves to the way they are. And this certainly found out through these profiles on them, that they have completely different feelings about themselves and what they look like to the world than what the world look at them as. And that's quite an interesting one. So we use the profiles, we use the statistics, but in the end, and I'll say when you use your gut feeling, So my most successful pairing was Francesco Molinari and Tommy Fleetwood. And I get a phone call from Francesco one day, and phone rings, Francesco Molinari, pick it up, and say, how are you? And he does not say a lot. And I was like, that's literally one player that hadn't called me. So I was like, okay, well, I better see what this is about. So he says, I would really like to play with Tommy. I go, oh. And I kind of went in my head, like I had some ideas with Tommy, I had some ideas with Francesco. Francesco had a really, really strong season. And I had some completely different ideas. I was like, oh, would you now? And I was like, and he says, he just goes through it. Yeah, we think that's a good idea. I said, oh, what are you doing? I was like, well, once we're done to finish that. I said, what are you doing? Oh, I'm on holiday. I said, oh, where are you? I'm sitting on a beach in the Bahamas. Oh, that's nice. Who are you on holiday with? Oh, I'm on holiday, me and Valentina on holiday with Claire and Tommy. I was like, oh, well, no wonder you two come up with this. And in a half-drunk conversation, you two just come up with, well, we like this. And I was like, oh, well, that's great. But what I did once I was finished with the conversation was I was like, you know what, something tells me I just got to check this. So I took everything and I said I had 5 guys working all year for me on statistics. And I said to them, just run the numbers on these two on the golf course, how they fit each other and everything. And they came back and said, well, we do believe that Tommy should play with Henrik. That is very suitable. But these two, there's no red flags on these two on this golf course together. And when I stood and it came down to the pairings and they came over and you know the way they were with each other, something in my gut just said to me, you know what, I'm going to give these two a go. And I played them the first morning and they were the success story. We lost the first morning 3-1 and they were the success story, and I thought, I'm going to let them run. And they ran 4 out of 4, and then Tommy lost in the singles, but Francesco won his singles. So they became the great success story of that Ryder Cup, and it came out of 2 guys sitting on a beach drinking pina coladas together. So it's not all about statistics and profiles, it's also about what your gut tells you.
Wonderful, which brings me back to the point of this morning. We think this is a great venue for a Ryder Cup planning meeting. Beaches.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna wrap it up with one last question and then open it up to the floor for questions, if you don't mind. But leadership is also about having fun. It's about enjoying the pressure, enjoying the moment. And I'd just like to know from both of you, the light-hearted, the funniest moment that you have experienced at a Ryder Cup.
Sunday night in Medina.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the party is when you win. I mean, like there's just, you know, people are on mission, you know, the whole week, probably months in advance, and when it ends up on an amazing note, you can just see on people's faces, you actually rediscover people, because like this huge amount of pressure comes down, and it's just like, I mean, I remember saying this in this interview, I was hugging people I've never met before, and it's just like everything just falls. And I'm sure Paris would have been exactly the same thing when you look at what happened on the last day, and you know, the amount of pressure that these players are throughout the year as well. When everything falls, it's just everything goes out the window.
Yeah, I understand.
Well, I mean, there's so much in it, but I don't know if funny moments are, I mean, there's obviously small moments during the week, but I'll tell you my favorite moment from Paris. Friday morning we lost 3-1, and I sent 8 guys out, 4 foursomes out in the afternoon to play that afternoon, and they won 4-0. Unbelievable achievement, and they won early, they won big, all of them, and that gives one thing you don't have as a captain is time. You know, once the match is over, you're press conferences, TV, you're doing all these things. You don't really have that much time with your players, so it's kind of the days just tick over. But for those reasons that they won early, we all of a sudden had an extra hour. So I did my TV and my press conference, but I said to my vice captains, listen, just get them in the locker room, 12 players, 12 caddies. I just want them there, don't let anyone go home. Just want them there. So I went in and did my stuff, and I got back in the locker room, and I built the locker room. We didn't use the locker rooms at Paris National. We built our own locker room. We built it in a U shape. I wanted to be in a position where I could see all of them if I wanted to talk to them, and we built this fantastic, beautiful locker room with so many memories in it. But when I got in there, There was 12 of them sitting there with their caddies, so 24 guys sitting there. And it's quite a moment for me to come in and stand in front of these guys, and they're sitting there on a little bench looking up at you like, what's coming now? And I said to them, you know what? I want to say to you, obviously this afternoon is a historic moment for European Ryder Cup team, and I want you to enjoy this moment. I want you to jump up and down. I want you to go and have a beer. I want you to really, really enjoy everything about what you've done. You should be so proud of yourself. I want you to go back to the hotel. I want you to sing in the shower, and I want to celebrate who you are right now. But once you come down in the team room tonight, it's all about eyes tomorrow. We played for 8 points. There's 28 to play for, so there's nothing has won. But I want you to celebrate what you are. And so they started shouting and screaming and what they do, and I went and did a couple of things, and me and Grace got in a car. They'd all left, and we got in a car and went back to the hotel. And we got back to the hotel, and I just said to her, I just want to go in the team room for 2 seconds before we go up and have a shower. And I walked in the team room, and I looked in at in the door of the team room, and they were all there sitting eating and quietly, and Grace is my partner. She says to me, what was that all about? And I said to her, you know what, I came here with a belief that we could win this, but when you look at them and the way they're doing it for each other and the way they are, the way they're listening, they're going to win this, and they're not going to need any help from anyone to win this. And they went and won it on the back of each other and not about everybody else. But we believe that we created an environment for them to be like that. And that's the greatest thing I take away from that week.
Wonderful. I think that's a lovely note to end on. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
I'll clap to
If I may ask if there are any questions from the floor for the two gentlemen? All answered, everybody?
Yeah, one question. You said you had a sort of profile of each and every player and your notebook, and your vice captain have the notebook, but the players themselves have to make sure that they can collaborate together, especially by statistics for some or whatever. But in the normal team, they could still have some fights together eventually, because they don't have your tools of knowing how to speak to each other. So how did you manage that?
Yeah, but I think you believe that if you get the right profiles, personalities in an environment where, you really like to have an experienced guy with a guy that, arm around the shoulder, but then not everybody's capable of putting an arm around the shoulder, even though they have a lot of experience. Some experienced guys needs to play with guys that also have experience. I hate bringing up Rory, but he's a great example of a player that we always have struggled with finding a partner for, because he wants to be, he thinks in his own mind he's that guy that needs to put, and he's not that guy. He needs somebody that can stand on his own 2 feet and doesn't need to just play, and respect Rory for who he is. The Americans had that problem with Tiger. They always felt like they had to, if you look through the history of the Ryder Cup, they searched and searched and searched for a partner for him. He played with new people all the time because they couldn't find a partner where it worked. Because Tiger became that guy that should play with the young guy. He should play with he will handle that. But imagine being the young guy. You stand there and you go, I don't want to play with him. I'm being judged on every goal shot I hit. I can't hit it like him. It's so daunting. So if Tiger doesn't have the ability to talk him into that environment where this guy can perform, then it becomes a mismatch. So you look at the profile, you look at the people the way you know them. There's some history with some of them that's played together before in Ryder Cups. But you look at that, so you end up, and that's why once you move one, so if you go, I got 4 pairings here, and you go, I don't really like this, so you move this guy. Now all of a sudden you go, and now it's all a mess. Stick to what you know. And I promised myself, unless we were really, really getting a whooping, I'll stick to what I believed from the beginning. I'll stick to my pairings. I'll stick to the people that I knew was going to function together. We lost 3-1 the first morning. Never panic. You know, just, okay, these are the 8 we go with this afternoon. This is what we believe in. They knew it. I went round, and this is the first time we ever did it. All that and get focused on what they had to do on Friday afternoon. Get that conversation done with them so they can perform their best. And that's what that's the one, some of those things that we did that was a little bit different, I think made a big difference in how they reacted. But we know them very well. We analyze them down to the smallest details. We'll never put 2 out together that don't get on. It doesn't work like that. We don't try and, we know when they go on a golf course, their personalities are not going to get in the way of each other. Their golf might. We accept. I always say this, you win Ryder Cups with 8 or 9 guys playing well. That's what you need. You're never going to have 12 that plays well. I've only been at 1 Ryder Cup where 12 played well, and that was when we won in Detroit. And won big in Detroit. All 12 played well. But you're going to win Ryder Cups with 8 or 9 playing well, and that's all you need. You accept that players are going to go out and not play very well. That's part of it. But you just hope that they got more that play badly than you do. So.
Thanks. Any other questions?
If I can, Thomas, I think the way you talk as well is one thing that you've done, and many leaders are not have the strength, I won't say something else, but the strength to do, and that is to have the difficult conversations with the personalities. You have 12 great golfers. In business, we have great leaders as well, but sometimes you have to have the difficult conversations. So how did you tackle that yourself personally to make your team motivated?
So there's 2 things that was hard for me. The first thing was I had to leave some, when I made my 4 captain's picks for the team, I had to leave some out. You know, it's easy to call the guys that's made the team, but I called all the guys that thought that had a chance of making the team. I had a personal conversation with them why they weren't there, or why I had picked somebody else. I think they deserved, they all fought hard to try and make the team, so I think they deserved that. That's one of the hard things. So, you know, it's I think you can recognize it's easy to call somebody to give them the job. It's the guy that didn't get the job that's a harder conversation. So, and then I had one situation during the week. Rory wasn't playing very well. He lost the first morning with Torbjørn Olesen, and he got out with Poulter in the afternoon, and Poulter played extremely well. Rory was okay. There was a big call to sit him down from media and stuff because he wasn't playing very well. And I was never going to sit him down. He's the number 1 guy in our team, certainly to the Americans. And if I got him sat down, that would get their tail up. That's the one guy they want to get at. So I was never going to sit him down. So when I started moving into my team for Saturday morning and the foursomes for Saturday afternoon, I realized very quickly there was one guy that wasn't going to play. He was Danish. He's been my younger brother on tour for 10 years. Very, very dear friend in Torbjørn Olesen. And he was the guy that was going to miss out. I stood there and I thought, this is not a conversation I'm looking forward to. So on Saturday morning when the teams were playing, the guys that don't play can go and play a few holes a good bit behind. So he was playing a few holes with Henrik Stenson. And here I'd taken one of my vice captains, it was Patrick Harrington, and put him with those 2 just to see what was going on. And I got on the radio with Patrick and I said, where are you? We're just walking onto the first. And I took my buggy and I drove and stood halfway down the first, and they come down walking towards me. And Henrik was first, and I was like, this is what you're doing this afternoon, you're playing with Rosie, you know, as we planned. And I saw Torbjørn and he knew what was coming. And he walked straight past me. He just walked straight past me. I was just like, as he walked past me, I said, sorry mate, I mean, this is just, and I just thought, okay, how do I deal with this? Because the last person he wants to talk to right now is me. And I said to Harrington, just stick close to him all this afternoon. Be by his side, talk to him. It's all about the singles now for him. get him talked around so he can prove that I was wrong by playing well in the singles. So Harrington did that. Got back to the hotel in the evening, and I said to Westwood, I said, tomorrow when we go out in the singles, the other guys are going to float around a little bit with the singles matches, but I want you to just be with Torbjorn. He was playing Jordan Spieth. I said, I just want you to walk with Torbjorn the whole way. Lee was probably the most experienced, or is the most experienced guy there. And I want you, every time Jordan walks off the green, I want you to be in his way. I want Jordan to see you on every single green he walks off. And when you watch the video back, Lee's like 5-6 steps in on the green, right in Jordan's line, and he has to walk around him on every hole he comes off. Torbjorn won 5 and 4 and played unbelievable. But it was just, I tried to, instead of me managing it, I got somebody that he had a lot of respect for, both in Harrington and in Westwood, to manage that situation. So the hard conversations you need to have, and I've had some long conversations with him about it afterwards. But sometimes you also need to trust that you are not the right person for that conversation. Somebody else might be the right person for that conversation.
Yes, you just mentioned hard conversations. One hard thing for leaders today is to be able to take criticism, especially from members of the team. Did you have to face a similar situation?
Yeah, I picked a guy. I had 4 picks. I picked 3 guys that were pretty okay, and Ian Poulter, Paul Casey, and Henrik Stenson, Casey, and Poulter. But I picked Sergio as my 4th guy. Sergio had 1 4th place finish in that season, and he was playing the worst golf of his life. At that moment in time, and I still, and he has always been the heartbeat of our team. He is very much at the center of things in our Ryder Cup teams. He is also, to this day, the highest point scorer in the Ryder Cup. I picked him, and the criticism I got for picking him was relentless. And my head was on the line for, if Sergio hadn't performed, and we had lost, it would have been down to that. But I had to deal with that question. That was the first question I got all the time, how I could pick him. He had finished 4th, fortunately, on that golf course in Paris that season, but he had no good placements otherwise than that. And I left out a guy like Matt Wallace that had won 3 times on tour that year. So, you make big decisions and you stand by your decisions, but the criticism comes your way. But I think sometimes you see the bigger picture. I've been part of so many Ryder Cups. I know what he brings. I looked at it statistically and thought, well, he brings this statistically, but I looked at the personality and what he brings. And it was really difficult at that moment in time to have a European Ryder Cup team without him in it, because he brings so much to the team and the team room and the environment. And I ran the risk of it being a bit soulless without him. So I took the risk on him for what he brings, not just as a golfer, but more for what he brings as a person. But it came under a lot of criticism. And you deal with it and go, you've got to trust your decisions. You've got to trust what and go with your decision. As soon as you start doubting your decision, then you made the wrong decisions. I believe strongly in this decision. I believe it was the right decision for the bigger picture, and I went with it and I stood by it. I kept bringing up his qualities, all the good things that he brings, because I knew he would hear it as well. I knew he would hear through media and everywhere what I was saying about him. So I knew that through that conversation all the time, he would grow. And I was willing to take the fall and I prepared myself for, if this doesn't go right, I knew that would come back to haunt me. But, as a Ryder Cup captain, you're a hero if you win and you're a villain if you lose. And it doesn't matter. We've had good captains that lost, and we've had pretty poor captains that's won. But, in the end, you're only as good as your players. But I believe that guy at that moment in time was invaluable to the team.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is that it, everybody? Well, thank you so much for attending, and thank you once again.